Hello gamers, and boy do I have a dilemma for you today. I'm starting to think my collection of this, and who could forget this is not enough to prove my virginity anymore. I think I'm gonna need something a lot stronger.
Oh boy, it's time for my hourly white bread session. Nope. Oh, what's this? Oh, no. Yeah, okay.
Well, if you're watching this video, odds are you have seen and watched the Avatar show, or at the very least, and I'm sorry if this is you, the movie. But if you haven't seen this will spoil the major events of the first book and the entire movie. To quickly summarize it though, there's this person named the Avatar that is born every time the last one dies, and this year's latest model is named Ong. We find out that he was stuck in an ice wall for 100 years. He makes like two friends, one of them is named Katara. Her mom died. I hope you know that. And then they go around and do stuff together, and that's the show. Of course, the summary does it a great disservice, but so does the movie. But if you haven't seen it, you should really check it out. The show is top quality, has a lot of heart, and the movie, oh boy, it's got none of that. Which brings me to the game adaptation of the movie. Which, it should give you a huge red flag, because most movie tie-in games back then, they were still a little bit of a hit or miss sort of deal. Well, in some cases, movie adaptations, you get a story stretched out with various other activities in between to extend it, or fun things from the universe to do. When I think of games like that, I usually think of like Toy Story 3 on the Wii, where you have levels where you have a feeling of exploration of like the various locations in the movie, and a fun hub world to build and expand upon, other weird wacky things to be a part of. And then you got Monkey King. Hi, thank you for coming in.
Oh, hi.
I was wondering about your resume. It just says, proud Chuka Tyson. Can you elaborate?
I'm the Chuka Tyson!
But let's move on to the actual story of the game, which actually has you playing through the perspective of Zuko instead of Ong, which I think is a smart twist of the game, and gives it a newish side to the story of Avatar that we haven't completely gotten to see before, and I think is actually one of the nicer touches of the game. But this is a movie adaptation, so, how do I put this? It sucked. The game has you start out in Zuko's ship, presumably around the iceberg where Ong was discovered before the beam of light, and some pirates start to attack your ship because you're a traitor to the Fire Lord. But by the time that you take it back, the ship blows up, and Zuko is left in the water to think about why these people attacked him. Silly Zuko, how could you forget that you challenged not Mark Hamill's authority, and now everyone hates you, minus Ebro. But by the time he is over with his sad thoughts, the Avatar is on his ship that sunk. What? But then the game switches perspective, and now you're playing as Ong and trying to escape the ship yourself. Bada bing, bada boom. It's literally the first level, but reskinned where everything isn't blowing up around you. But once you escape, it's all good because you're back on your flying mole rat, flying away. But like all things, like escaping on the mole rat, it comes to an end because Ong gets captured by Zhao. But Zuko gets jealous, so he goes incognito as the Blue Spirit and sneaks into the air temple where Ong is being held, and then breaks him out. Some fighting happens along the way, then Ong interrupts dinner.
It's the Avatar!
Looks like I've interrupted dinner.
And escapes. Later on, Zuko gets his ship blown up because he thought duct tape would fix it. After a while, Zuko sneaks himself underneath the Northern Water Tribe. Now it's time for filler level game show. Zuko, on his way to the Water Tribe, has to A. Fight big spiders, B.
The giant enemy spider.
Or C. Bolt. If you
C.
answered C,
C's the answer.
please delete your game. Yeah, it had spiders. What more could I say? And it had a lot of them. Don't you remember them from the show? Or the movie? Yeah, me neither, but they're here, I guess. But anyway, Zuko sneaks into the city. The story then switches back to Ong and his defense against the Fire Nation invaders that pop up out of the ground. Well, Zuko did it. Now after all of this fighting, Ong falls down into the inner layer of the Northern Water Tribe to fight more spiders?
Well, Zuko.
But this time around, Ong actually kills the
Giant enemy spider.
and then he gets back to the city to go into his meditation with the fishes. Now we go back to Zuko's perspective, and he found the Ong. But Katara was in the way, but instead of a cool fight, Zuko just blew up her face, so she could finally join her mom again. How nice of him. He then kidnaps the sleeping Avatar, and hides them in the storage room where the game now becomes Duck Hunt. And the targets are the Fire Nation. With all the noise, Ong finally woke up and began to evade Zuko's shots, but then Katara, by the power of her need to tell you about her mom, came back to life and froze Zuko. The game then goes back to Ong, who suddenly uses the power of the Avatar state and does some cool anime moves that look better than the movie at times, and proceeds to absolutely murder the Fire Nation. What a cool monk. After all of this, Zhao proceeds to punch a fish, and Yue feels sad for the fish and passes out, but she falls into the pool and loses her white hair and her pulse for the moon. But Zhao, surprised to see his buddy Zuzu alive, now challenges him to a fight. It was a long fight. PK Fire was a very popular move used during this fight, but once it was over, Iroh and Zuko left, sparing Zhao. The Water Nation now hate Zhao for his crime of punching a fish, so they go to him and drown him to let him know how the fish feel on a daily basis.
Well, can you really blame me, though?
By the time Zuko and Iroh escape, Ong pulls a massive wave to scare the Fire Nation to leaving. Zuko has another angsty, "I must capture him" monologue one last time, and the story is over. To be honest, when it comes to this game and the story, it really doesn't go that far off the source material. Well, that sadly being the movie in this case. It comes across as an interesting twist at the start, playing the game from Zuko's perspective of the story and starting off in a fight that we hadn't seen before in the Avatar universe. But even that detail is just thrown away because the ship is magically fixed for the next level. And it also flushes away even more potential by having throwaway levels like Zuko and Ong fighting spiders underground the Water Tribe for 2 levels, and having an entire level dedicated to him fighting off soldiers that are trying to get to him while protecting the Avatar. For context, that level is 3 minutes long, compared to the other levels' run times of about 30 minutes each. So in total there were 3 out of 10 filler levels. And if you want, you can count even the first mission as a filler level because it's just a tutorial, when they could have easily made the stage where Ong is escaping the tutorial level. So this game really has 4 out of 10 levels being completely wasted. They had 3 different characters for you to play as in total that all played slightly differently. There was Ong, Zuko, and the Blue Spirit. But there was only 1 level dedicated to playing as the Blue Spirit, which was a huge disappointment. The idea of playing as the Blue Spirit and sneaking around, but not really sneaking around, in the game, in an actual story-based level, could have been something that the game needed to actually cement itself in the Avatar movie universe. And sure, the details of the Spiderland or Zuko protecting Ong add some crappy details to the story of the movie, but at the same time, this clearly isn't what the movie needs to redeem itself, because let's be realistic, that movie can't be redeemed at all. But there were some interesting details from the game that were different from the movie that actually weren't too bad. To start this section off, one of the biggest differences is the fact that Sozin's comet had already arrived. You might be thinking, well, wait a minute, then they should be able to shoot fire from their hands according to the movie. Well, you're absolutely right. And it's clear that this was made this way in the game for gameplay purposes, because you would have to find a source of fire just to fight, and the game would end up getting nowhere. Just like the movie. But this does put a whole other plot hole kind of into the mix of this, because in the show, they were racing against time before the comet arrived, because then the Fire Nation would basically become godlike. And in the movie, because the comet hadn't arrived yet, they only could use fire if there was a source of fire near them. So for the series of games that probably would have followed if the movie ended up being successful, they wouldn't have the same tense race against time sort of feeling. Another detail that is actually taken from the show this time is the events that followed Aang saving the Blue Spirit. Unlike the movie, as you likely know, Aang saves him and asked him if he thinks they could have been friends. This scene sets up events that occur later in the show, but in the movie it's just outright removed and it's Aang looking at him and leaving. But in the game version of it, I believe something along the lines of what happened in the show actually occur. I can't truly tell because that has Zuko's voiceover instead. But nonetheless, Zuko's voiceover gives it an interesting perspective that most fans probably never thought about. But the final detail was Zuko and Zhao and their fight on the bridge. Firstly, I like the detail. Zuko throughout the game, the movie, and the show talked of his distaste for him. With no Iroh in sight, this version of the fight got to happen. For me, I like that Zuko got his revenge. It just makes sense that he would do that. Zuko beat him into submission, but when the time came to it, Iroh did show up and stop him from finishing it, which felt believable to me. But it would also explain why Zhao was so easily drowned by 4 random waterbenders. It's just because he was beaten and exhausted compared to the movie where it's just like he gave up.
There really weren't all too many variations from the movie, but the variations that were there, in all honesty, made the experience feel a lot better of a time to play. Personally, me playing this game was to see what this game actually had to offer to the Avatar universe, and it didn't really have anything to give out, especially in comparison to the show. Granted, I was only trying to compare it to the movie. No wonder why Wikipedia cited in the reception of the game that, quote, reviews for the game were generally much more positive than those for the film.
Since the dawn of gaming, there's always been about pressing your fingers on some buttons to see something do something. That's why we play games, for the immersion of us doing something else in a world. Of course, this concept isn't as cool as it once was, like in the days of Pong, cause now we're just used to it. But now there are so many possibilities of doing things in games, so why would you do this? Or more specifically, why would you play this? I came here to master the elements and to be cool as the characters from Avatar. Well, I hate to break it to you, it ain't happening. You know what happened to the 4 elements in the game? I'll tell ya. Well, to start off, Earth just doesn't exist at all. Like, it's just not in the game, at all. Waterbending barely made the cut into the game. Some of the Water Tribe members assault you with it, but you don't play Katara or have Ong waterbend at any point during the gameplay. And the waterbenders attack you with it, and it's just a reskin of the firebenders, basically. Now, time to talk about the fun elements, the ones that you end up playing. Air, of course, is only locked to Ong, duh.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And then there's also fire, which is locked to Zuko. Here's the thing though, Ong and Zuko play exactly the same. You have the same basic fighting animations, even though their gameplay might be a little bit different. It's the exact same in feeling. They both have unique moves to their fighting. Ong can grab people and throw them using his air or shoot air balls, but Zuko can also shoot fireballs from his hands and stronger fireballs if he holds them a bit longer. They also have another individual ability. Ong can slow down time, and Zuko can shoot multiple fireballs much faster and easier. But each of them have a special move. Holding down A, B, and Z, they can charge up to make a giant exploding ball of air or fire. Then there's the Blue Spirit. He gets a dash attack and no other fire powers, which makes sense. He's trying to hide his identity. But also, his special move is used for performing sneak attacks that wouldn't kill the enemy that you fight before all the other ones. The gameplay and how it combines together for combos is sort of non-existent though, because with the normal attacks you just spam it and they can't do anything until they're knocked onto the floor. Then, when they're on the floor you can't move or damage them, so you have to wait for them to get back up to let the beating resume. When it comes to just shooting them with fire or air, they just stand there and take it and only get knocked to the ground if their health is low. Then there's being flung around by Ong. Yeah, you throw them and knock them on the ground, but it just isn't satisfying. There isn't enough damage dealt to even justify doing it. There are also the aerial attacks that you can perform with each of the characters. This is the only place where you feel like you can combo moves together. You gotta jump, strike them down from the air, and then you keep mashing A until they get knocked down. The only reason this seems to work better is the enemies are stunned once they're hit from the air. And so if you miss, because of the movement in this game is so janky, you don't have to worry so much whenever you're on the ground. In summary, the combat is just something you would expect out of a crappy tie-in game like this. Now I'm going to be talking about the obstacles in the game, or the platforming of it. To start this section, I'm going to read the definition of a platformer. Platform games are a video game genre and subgenre of action games. In a platformer, a large part of the gameplay involves jumping and climbing between suspended platforms while avoiding obstacles. So why on earth does this game suck at it? It is absolutely terrible. I don't remember seeing Zuko or Ong having this problem jumping in the movie, so why should I?
Dude, why do I even read these anymore?
Well, this game has probably the worst case of platforming I have ever seen in my life. Just look at how terrible it is. If you mess up, you gotta try all of this all over again. The first time a cliff hazard was put in the game, I didn't feel scared by it, but that's because I was lucky the first time. Literally 2 minutes later, I was treated to the rest of the game. Now it's time to talk about the real challenge, and for some more context, I set the game on its hardest difficulty to really get a feel for this game. In the game, similar to the character selection, there are 3 different choices of enemies you gotta fight. You got the one with the halberd that annoyingly pokes you, you got the sword fighter who stands no chance, and then the person shooting stuff in the back. The combination of the halberd user and the guy shooting in the back is the only chance for them to actually win. Then there's also the big baddies that take a lot of hits and then they eventually go down. That's about as much as I could say for them, and like all of them. But Ezra, you ask, what about the spiders? Well, that's exactly what I thought. They're sort of a mix of sword fighters and shooters. They can get close to you really fast and follow you for a while, and they do that really well. That can't be said with most of the AI, because you got people like this who just exist to, you know, breathe. But time for the cream of the crop of the fights, the boss fights. The first stage has you fight the main invader who, you know, is blowing up your ship. You punch, you kick, you scream at this dude until he starts throwing barrels at you like Donkey Kong. And you repeat the cycle until he dies. The next one is in the 4th level. Do you remember that time when Ong fights a tank in the movie? And it's really fun and cool to watch that if you fast forward the footage you forget, oh my gosh, I've sunk 7 hours playing this game? Yep. Then you have the giant spider who has the power to crash my game apparently.
Only God could free you from this pain.
Then halfway through level 7, you got Zuko fighting one of the Rhino Warriors from the show, and man, I miss this show so much. You have no idea what 10 pages of writing and 7 hours of gameplay in a crappy movie does to a person. And finally, the final boss, which has you punch, kick, and scream at Ja, while he PK fire spams you like a Nest main, until he throws barrels or gets his friends to beat you up. Though at the end, while I played it, I did get close to dying, and what kept me going was the fact that I would have to record the entire segment again. And I'd much rather just do about literally anything else. In summary, the gameplay, fighting, and the enemy types are comparable to Star Wars The Force Unleashed 1 and 2. Just look at the comparisons and try denying it, it's not the same thing. But done instead, you know, by the developers in 1 hour. Before I finish talking about the game, I do want to talk about one of the few redeeming factors that it actually has, and that would be the cutscenes. Sure, they're the movie version of the series, but you gotta hand to them, the style for the cutscenes are actually pretty good to look at overall, and it gives me a feeling that maybe if they had Zuko narrate everything instead, it would have gotten a lot more attention and praise in the theater. But there is one more thing I need to talk about, and that would be Zuko's desk. Yup, these little medallions that you collect throughout the game serve one purpose. And that are these cool, angsty, see what I did there? Images of Ong and the other members of the series. Looking online, I wasn't able to find if this is concept art for the game or the movie, but you see things like a live-action Mobo in here. But that'll haunt your nightmares. And a Kyoshi warrior, which makes me wonder if they had to plan to put them in the movie. And the worst sin of the movie series, in my opinion, is if this is really the movie concept art, why couldn't they have found someone who was just like this Iroh?
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Well, after all that, I think, you know, I'm out of the crisis state now. I know for a fact that I'm going to be a virgin for a very long time. I can tell because, you know, while I was playing, I started sweating, and I was able to create extra virgin olive oil from my essence.